Good evening. Welcome to the January 4th, 2023 City of Minot Planning Commissioning meeting. Call the roll.
Bauman?
Yes.
Domes?
Yes.
Bacon?
Yes.
Gates?
Yes.
Oakhalter?
Yes.
Iverson?
Yes.
Kibler?
Yes.
Leiter? Longton?
Yes.
Minham?
Yes.
Nesdall?
Yes.
Offerdahl?
Yes.
Pontanila?
Yes.
You have a quorum.
All right, with that, let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, before we hop into the agenda items here, I just want to welcome a couple of the new commissioners that have joined our team. We greatly appreciate you guys hopping on, and if you got any questions, feel free to ask any one of us. A few of us have been on here for a few years, so welcome. Moving on to agenda item number 4. We'll do the approval of the December meeting minutes, December 6th meeting minutes. Can I get a motion?
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve. Commissioner
second.
Volkhalter. Second by Commissioner Kibler, is that right? Okay. Call the roll.
Bauman?
Yes.
Domes? Bacon?
Yes.
Gates?
Yes.
Oakhalter?
Yes.
Iverson?
Yes.
Kibler?
Yes.
Longton?
Yes.
Minham?
Yes.
Nesdall?
Yes.
Offerdahl?
Yes.
Pontanila?
Yes.
Motion carries.
And I just want to double check here. Was there any discussion on the meeting minutes? I kind of jumped over that. I apologize. Seeing none, then our vote stands. Okay, moving on to agenda item number 5. It's going to be a portion of a subdivision of Lot 6, zoning change. It's a public hearing request by Austin Gleave on behalf of AW Properties LLC for zoning map amendment from P Public District to R1 Single Family Residential for the purpose of combining with an adjoining residential lot presently zoned R1 Single Family Residential. The legal description of the property is subdivision of Lot 6, Section 24, 155-83, west half of the west half except north 110 degrees. Property is unaddressed and located just west of 701 10th Avenue Southeast. With that, we'll turn it over to the city or the staff for the findings and reports.
Thank you, Chairman Offerdahl, members of the commission. So the subject property is bounded in white, located just west of the intersection of 10th Avenue Southeast and 8th Street Northeast or Southeast. So the property is approximately 1.7 acres in size. So the property is presently zoned P Public District, and staff was not able to determine precisely why the property was originally zoned P Public District. Also want to clarify for any audience members, P Public District is not the same thing as public ownership. So it's privately owned and has been for quite some time. And it's different than P Public District. So the future land use for the property is low density residential. So the applicant intends to combine this large 1.7 acre piece of property with the property to the east at 701 10th Avenue Southeast for the purpose of cleaning up the property and making it simpler to sell. So here's some site photos. This is facing northeast. You can probably tell at least a little bit. There's probably a 60-foot drop-off running south to north on this property. So there's significant terrain issues. Developing it would be very difficult and very likely why it has not developed in any way, shape, or form since it was created. So here's the findings of fact. The project satisfies the 4 evaluative criteria, and the Planning Commission has the authority to recommend whether the zoning map amendment is approved or denied. And staff is recommending approval with no conditions. I'll stand for questions.
Any questions for the city staff?
Mr. Chairman, if I could, what is that 300-foot buffer around the property all about?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman Offerdahl, Commissioner Kibler. That 300-foot buffer on the property is the notification boundary. So we send notifications directly to property owners within that 300-foot boundary.
Any other questions for city staff?
So just to clarify one more time, this parcel of land is currently privately owned, and regardless of whether we change the zoning or not, it will continue to be privately owned, but we're just changing the zoning or the uses allowed on that property from what's allowed in the public zone to what's allowed in the R1 zoning requirements. Am I correct in that understanding?
That's correct.
Okay, sounds good. And just make sure that anyone listening knows that it is privately owned and will continue to be privately owned. Okay, thanks.
Any other questions for city staff? One moment, please. Oh, well, one moment, please. I'll open the public hearing and then you'll be able to come up. Any other questions? Okay. With that, we'll open up the public hearing. Is there anybody in attendance that wishes to speak on behalf of this agenda item? On behalf, for this agenda? Are you for this agenda item, ma'am?
I don't know if I am or
Okay,
not.
okay. Then can you, your name and address on that sheet there, and then let us know?
My simple question is, this change has to do with building on the property. So I need to know what's going to be built on the property or what could be built on the property. It says it's single family. Does that mean they can put townhouses in there, or what does this look like?
Single family typically is just not multiple households, so it's just single family.
So
Staff want to add
would
on?
he then put one house on the residence, or, I mean, on the property, what?
There we go, thanks. Give Derek a second.
Give Derek a
Speak from the
second here.
All right, is that better? Right. Right, so it's going to be rezoned and consolidated with the property to the east, and R1 single-family residential, with little exception, only allows for one single-family residential structure to be constructed on the site. So that will be their single-family residential property. At the end of the day, they own both those properties. And Austin, I don't know if he's here? Yep, I'm here. Yep. Oh, perfect. I'd just as well let Austin speak for himself and explain what his intentions are with the property, because he'll do a much better job.
Okay.
Thank you.
Does that help with your questioning?
Yeah,
Okay.
it does, thank you.
And then we'll allow Mr. Gleave to come up, and if you have any other further questions, you're allowed to come back up. You're welcome.
Yeah, I don't have any intention of building a new house on that lot. It was just to simply combine it for confusion for resale purposes. That's honestly about it. I have no intentions of building any structure on that property. Just combining with the lot next to it.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Gleave? Okay.
I have a couple questions.
Yes, sir.
I have some property right next door.
Can you state your name and your address there, and then sign that sheet of paper on there, please?
Sure.
Appreciate it.
You know, right now, the property is it's vacant more or less, but it's home to over 20-some turkeys and wildlife, and 20-some deer, so I'm kind of concerned about what's going to happen to them, because if we don't have egress to that, you know, they come through that coulee and come up into our yards. Well, it doesn't bother me that they come into my yard. I mean, I could care less, because the only thing I don't really like is I've had 2 deer die in my place because somebody shot them, and they ended up in my yard. But I was just wondering what's going to happen to them. I mean, you know, if someone comes in and now all of a sudden they decide to fence this area in, that wildlife has no place to go. What's going to happen to them? I mean, you know, it'd be nice to have some kind of provision or some kind of an access for them to get out of that coulee somehow, because there's not just that deer, you're blocking off all their total access around there. So what's gonna happen to them? I mean, I like wildlife. I mean, I like to see the turkeys, I like to see the deer. People drive by and stopping all the time. You know, they cautious, they let them, nobody runs them over, you know. Deer come across and they'll wait for the deer and just kind of enjoy it, you know. And that's, you know, if we could have some kind of provision that, you know, there'd be some access for the deer to come through there, and the turkeys, you know, of course, they'll find a way through, but, you know, just something to have some kind of provision in there that, you know, if they're not gonna develop it, you know, don't fence it, you know, I mean, but, you know, it's, you zone it R1, well, you know, it's residential, any property can do it. He doesn't do nothing. The way he leaves it right now, that's fine, but there's no guarantee any place that the new owner, whoever it is or whatever, will leave it the same way, you know? If it's property like that and it's left the same, it's no problem, but what's gonna happen, you know? I know the people in the cemetery probably don't like it because the deer come over there, visit the cemetery and stuff, but hey, that's what biggest my concern, because I've been over in that property there, I've looked it over. You know, there's nothing way you're gonna build on that. You're gonna build up, you're gonna have piers way down. I mean, you know, you're gonna be building on stilts. So, and it does drop off, but there's some place in there. And I drove by there the other day and looked down in there, and you could see deer in there, and the turkeys are on the road again, you know, and so, but that's one of my concerns about it, what's gonna happen. I'd like, if somebody could answer that, you know, be fine. That's about all I have to say right now.
And then could I get your name and your address then?
Yep, putting it down right now.
Maybe you can show us on the video here of where your property address is according to, Derek can go back, the overview. They don't have house numbers here.
See, I'm on 10th Avenue, that's the project. I'd be right in that area someplace here, let's see. That corner, that's probably, yeah, that's mine right there.
He's pointing to a piece of property just southwest of the subject property.
Yeah, I think that's the one.
Okay.
Yeah, that looks about that, right there, I think that's it. My address is 608 10th Avenue. Okay. And I, you know, like I said, I like the wildlife. I've had to haul 2 dead deer out of there, but last time I called the game warden, he already knew who I was, so. But if someone could give me that answer, I'd appreciate it. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I do have a question for Mr. Van Dyke again.
Yes, go ahead.
When I look at this, I don't see any dimensions to this rectangle of land. How many outlots could that be turned into were someone to replat it?
Yeah. Chairman Offerdahl, Commissioner Kibler. So our minimum square footage for a residential lot would be 7,500 square feet. It's 1.7 acres. I'll let you do the math on that one, but you'd have to minus the right-of-way that would have to go and serve those created lots, so probably, I don't know, I'd say 6, probably. Again, as I mentioned, the topography, there's a reason that it's still vacant. So the practicality versus what somebody can do with the property versus what's feasible is completely different. That doesn't mean that land values in 40 years won't render that completely developable and it'll pencil out. But at this time, and with what Austin has mentioned is his intentions just to combine it with the best that he'd be able to put out there is some type of accessory structure. And again, he'd still have the additional expense of dealing with the terrain. So that it's more about likelihood of what's going to happen versus what could happen. The zoning ordinance allows for a lot of different things, but they're not practical in all instances, so.
Yeah, thank you. And that may speak to the gentleman's question about wildlife. If it's impractical to develop, then perhaps the deer will still use it.
Well, I'm concerned that someone's gonna put a fence in there.
It needs to be under
You're gonna get locked out of that 1.7 acres.
Can you come up to the microphone, sir, if you, thank you.
My biggest concern about that is if someone owns that property, they might decide to put up a fence in there, and they, you can't stop them putting up a fence. They put a fence around there. The deer couldn't have any access. The turkeys probably would have a limited access. So what are you gonna do with them? I mean, they're gonna starve or what, I don't like to see deer displaced like that. I mean, they roam around the neighborhood. Everybody's gotten used to them. Heck, nobody you talk to, well, we put up with it, it's no big deal, it's just part of life, They were here before we were, or whatever, this is their domain, not ours, but that's just the way I feel about the wildlife there. And I mean, I've had coyotes, I've had jackrabbits, I've had fox through the yard, I've had a variety of wildlife through the yard. It doesn't matter, just part of life, But I just concerned, and like I said, well, how many lots could be subdivided in there? And could I subdivide them off and later on come back here and want to subdivide the lots? And even if I sold them as lots, how many lots could I sell there? Maybe somebody wants a lot that's in the wildlife country. Well, then, you can sell each individual lot off. But that's, any other questions you have? Okay, thank you.
Answer your question, Commissioner Kibler?
Well, it certainly was a comment on my question. I don't know that we can
Right.
stop human progress
Right.
through zoning.
Any other questions?
Question for Mr. Van Dyke. What would be the practical impact of changing this from a public district to a residential district? I understand combining the properties is part of that, but like, would that change? They may have said in the information we got beforehand, but would there be any difference about what could be built on that land?
So typically with a public zone, we have a specific plan. It's limited to the specific use declared at the time that the public zone is approved. In this case, I wasn't able to find anything that was readily available, other than it's strange that it came into private ownership. The public and semi-public district typically would be reserved for your schools, your parks, your city facilities. You could also have semi-public, so transmission station, substation, things of that nature. But just to have a private piece of property in the middle of single-family residential, it's very atypical.
And the question I have for you, Principal Van Dyke, too, is public property, he can still fence it, whoever the previous owner is. If we were to deny this right now, the previous owner could still fence it if he chose to, along with the residential, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Similarly, how common would it be that a planning commission or city council would deny someone's ability to put a fence on either like a privately owned parcel?
Be very rare, and I can't think of a particular reason why we would provide some type of limitation on fencing surrounding a piece of property. Typically, yeah, so I'm sure there's probably an instance where it might be appropriate, but for a simple rezone from public to single family, it's not the case.
Thanks.
Question here.
Okay.
How far off the property line is that fence supposed to be now in the city here? I thought it was, when I talked to someone in the city once before here, they mentioned that we have to stay a certain distance off the property line. How far off would that be? Can anybody tell me that? He said, you're supposed to be, when you move your fence sign, it's not supposed to be right on the property line. You're supposed to move it in so many feet or whatever so you can get in and work on the fence and not be on your neighbor's yard. So that's the understanding I had. And I mean, if that was something like that was left on there, with a fence like that, they'd still have access to go around it, but, yeah, that's what I was concerned about. So I don't know how many feet it is or what it is, but that's what I talked to someone one time. They said, well, you shouldn't put your fence right on exactly right on your property line, because how you gonna do maintenance on the fence? You have to be on your neighbor's yard, you know. So. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? So we're still in the public hearing here, and we'll just go, is there anybody who wishes to speak in opposition? Kind of go through, anybody else wishes to speak for or against this agenda item? Okay, with that, I'll close the public hearing, and I'll turn it over to the commissioners for a motion.
I'd make a motion based on staff finding of fact.
Motion. Yeah. Commissioner Kibler, we a motion to approve based on the staff? Okay.
I will second that.
Commissioner Iverson, second? Okay. Second by Commissioner Iverson. Any discussion? Any further discussion? Go ahead, Commissioner.
I just want to say thanks to the public who came and spoke. I hope that we were able to answer all of your questions. One of the things that I think I'm going to be supporting this in part, even though I'm someone who wants to make sure that wildlife has access through. I think whether it stays public or goes to R1 residential, there will still be a thoroughfare for wildlife to be moving north-south along that property. And that's because of those setbacks you talked about, which would be in effect as far as I understand. And then also the fact that whether it stays public or R1, we don't have the ability to limit those things. So I think from my seat, we're going to be able to keep everyone happy in your concerns about wildlife movement and access to the property, at least moving north-south across the property is going to still be able to be maintained. So I'm happy that everyone can win. And I do appreciate that concern and that, big picture thought. So a really good conversation. It's just really nice to see. And I want to say thanks for everyone for being here.
Any further discussion? Okay, with that, call the roll.
Bauman?
Yes.
Domes? Yes. Bacon?
Yes.
Gates?
Yes.
Buchalter?
Yes.
Iverson?
Yes.
Kibler?
Yes.
Longton?
Yes.
Minham?
Yes.
Nesdal?
Yes.
Offerdahl?
Yes.
Pontanila?
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, moving on. Agenda item number 6, zoning change. Public hearing request by Kevin and Callie Black on behalf of the 28 North Main LLC, owner for a zoning map amendment from M2 Heavy Industrial District to CBD Central Business District. The purpose of this request is to facilitate a mixed-use development. The legal description for the property is original Minot Addition lots 3 through 10 and half Vac Alley on lots 3 through 7 and lots 34 through 36. That part of 37 through 39, block 19 being south of a line drawn 150 feet from the out and parallel with BN Railway, or RN, on side of the same portion of lots 37 and 38 and 34 through 39, except for BN right-of-way. The address for the property is 28 Main Street North. That will turn it over to the staff for the findings of facts and report.
Thank you, Chairman Offerdahl, members of the commission. So the property is located downtown between Main Street and First Street Northeast and immediately south of the railroad tracks. So it's bounded in white, and then the pink line would be the 300-foot buffer for notification. So as with a lot of properties downtown, much of it is zoned M1 or M2 industrial from its industrial roots. Several other properties in the downtown area have been rezoned to Central Business District in the last few years. This is an identical request. So the future land use map designates this property as industrial. This is planned to be updated in the 2040 comp plan to be downtown oriented, whether downtown mixed use or downtown fringe. This will be presented to Planning Commission in the coming months as the written plan is finalized, and Brian will talk a little bit more under other business with regard to that timeline. This is a picture of the property facing northeast. The specific plans are yet to be 100% finalized, but would include some mixed-use component. The timeframe for development has not yet been solidified, but maybe anywhere from 1 to 3 years. And Kevin is here if he's going to chime in if I misstated, or if his plans have changed. Findings of fact, they can be found in staff's written report. Ultimately, as with the last one, staff finds that all 4 of the valuation criteria have been satisfied, and Minot Planning Commission has the authority to hear the case and recommend approval or denial of the request to City Council. So staff is recommending approval with no conditions. I'll stand for questions.
All right, Dan. Any questions for city staff from the commissioners? Commissioner Bauman.
Mr. Van Dyke, I noticed in the staff report that you provided to us, one element of the development will probably include some parking for Credence Energy employees to be coming in and using that space for parking before coming to the office. I just want to clarify that in CBD, we don't require any sort of parking mandates, but this is just something that the property developer is wanting to do on their own, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I wonder, Mr. Van Dyke, if you can just sort of recall for us what kind of businesses are a part of an M2, which is heavy industrial, as opposed to like M1 light industrial, and then this business district, even lighter yet.
Sure. Chairman Offerdahl, Commissioner Kibler, if you think back to the salvage yard, that would be an M2 use. Typically, you're thinking smokestacks. It's more manufacturing, production, assembly. On a more intense scale, light industrial is more of your warehousing, so self-storage, things of that nature would differentiate the two between light and heavy industrial.
And that includes heavy trucks, doesn't it, as well? J-brake trucks?
Correct.
Yeah.
Any other questions for city staff? No questions? All right, seeing none, I'll open the public hearing. Is there anybody in attendance that wishes to speak on behalf of this agenda item? Well, sir, if we can get your name and address and then write that down on a piece of paper, please.
You bet. Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, Kevin Black, live at 1310 37th Avenue, Southeast Minot, also the owner of the property in question here. Thank you for considering this. The building was historically the Dakota Drug Building. It was fit the purpose of M2 at the time, and probably more so M1. Obviously, we have some plans to redevelop that to fit what I think ultimately aligns with the city's ultimate vision for downtown, which is central business. So this is an attempt, obviously, to move that out of a zoning that really doesn't fit the ultimate plan for downtown. Approving this change would give us the confidence to continue to invest and work with the architects, engineers, and developers to put a solid plan together for this property. So thanks for considering. Happy to stand for any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Black? Commissioner Bauman.
This is just me being curious and slightly nosy, but I'm curious, will there be any upwards development, or will it just be redevelopment of the two-story structure that's there now?
Yeah, so we are really in the planning phase of this. We actually have a meeting tomorrow with our architecture firm. I can tell you our intent would be a complete demolition and go vertical with multiple stories of mixed use, commercial, retail, food and beverage with residential above.
Cool, thanks.
Mr. Chairman, if I just, is this part of the Renaissance zone?
Yes.
For Renaissance zoning funding?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Kibler, yes, it is part of the city's Renaissance Zone.
Any other questions for Mr. Black? Okay.
Thank you.
We'll call you back up if we got anything else. Anybody else that wishes to speak on behalf of this agenda item from the public? Anybody wish to speak against this, in opposition of this agenda item? Anybody who would like to speak for or against? Okay. Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing and turn it over to the commissioners for a motion.
Move to approve based on staff recommendations and finding of fact.
I'll
Motion
second
by
it.
Commissioner Bauman and second by Commissioner Nesdell. Okay, any discussion? Any further discussion?
I have one, sorry.
Okay, Commissioner Bauman, go ahead.
This just seems like the more appropriate time to say it than in any previous sections, but I just want to say to the property owner, thank you very much for working to invest and really develop and redevelop the heart of Minot. There's a lot of benefits that go beyond just that property for having things like this. So I know it's a big step, it's a brave step, and we just really appreciate your time and energy and resources going into looking at this property. We know you've obviously done some great work downtown already, and it's noticed and appreciated, and so it's exciting to see this project come forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other further discussion? Okay, seeing none, we'll call the roll.
Bauman,
Yes.
Doms? Yes. Faken,
Yes.
Gates,
Yes.
Burkhalter,
Yes.
Iverson? Yes. Kibler,
Yes.
Longton,
Yes.
Minim,
Yes.
Nesdall,
Yes.
Offerdahl,
Yes.
Pontanila.
Yes.
The motion carries.
All right, moving on to agenda item number 7. Zoning amendment for Pizza Ranch. Public hearing request by Mike Christensen on behalf of A&M Properties LLC for a zoning map amendment from C4 Planned Commercial District to C2 General Commercial District. Purpose for the request is to facilitate a future expansion of the existing building. The legal description for the property is lots 4 and 5, Walmart Edition replat lot 4, 5, and 6. The address for the property is 305 37th Avenue Southwest. That will turn it over to the city staff for the findings and report.
Thank you, Chairman. Offered all members of the commission. So this subject property is located near Walmart in the southwest corner of South Broadway and 37th Avenue Southwest. So the zoning of the property is C4 Planned Commercial, and this zoning designation is a legacy district, meaning it's no longer granted. However, it does have an equivalent zoning district in the code, which is C2 General Commercial with a PUD, that's Planned Unit Development Overlay. A few recent C2 with PUD developments for comparison, so you know how it's appropriately applied, would be Blue on Broadway. It's a mixed-use structure, and the Trax development, which consists of seven-story buildings and some open space, event space. So by comparison, there's nothing remarkable about this property that would warrant a C4 zoning designation, and therefore the C2 with a PUD would not be appropriate. Therefore, staff is recommended to the applicant just a straight C2 zoning change. Further, C4 has to follow all the C2 with PUD requirements. And this means that so if they interfere whatsoever with the parking and/or on-site circulation, which completely encompasses the structure, then they have to come before Planning Commission with a planned commercial amendment. So knowing that they're relatively preliminary with their plans, but they know that they want to move forward, they'd rather just come back before you and ask for the rezone to C2. Otherwise, if their plans were to change and then they'd affect the on-site circulation or parking, again, they'd be back at every iteration to come before you. And again, this is just a multi-tenant commercial structure. This is a basic general commercial structure and use, and therefore that PUD component is not necessary. Future land use for this area is all commercial. Here's a picture facing north. Findings of fact are also provided. And with the others, meets all 4 of the criteria, as well as Planning Commission has the authority to hear the case and recommend approval to City Council, or recommend denial to City Council as well. So staff is recommending approval with no conditions. And I'll stand for questions.
All right, any questions for city staff?
Mr. Chairman, if I could, just out of curiosity, it's considered a legacy commercial C2 place or what?
Yeah, so Chairman Offerdahl, Commissioner Kibler, so what I mean by legacy means it's a zoning district that we no longer would grant to a new development. We have an equivalent zoning district that we would apply to all new developments, and that would be C2 with the planned unit development overlay. So we have an equivalent path forward for developments that are unique and exceptional. In this case, I think Walmart triggered the C4 plan requirement just because it was a massive, overall, at the time, massive development, multiple commercial outlots surrounding it. By today's standards, I think we'd still probably just go with the C2, general commercial. But if we did have specific concerns, we could implement that PUD overlay to ensure that the layout and functionality of the entire site was required to be reviewed by Planning Commission and City Council before changing. So.
Any other questions? Commissioner Baumann?
Does this change to C2 trigger any changes in terms of parking lots or landscaping on that property?
Chairman Offerdahl, Commissioner Baumann, so no, they would still be required based on the expansion. They couldn't be further into nonconformity of the traditional C2 requirements. Any expansion, it would be depending on how big this expansion is, will trigger what requirements and where those requirements go, whether it's landscaping or facade improvements. The building would meet our facade requirements already. As far as landscaping, it sounds like they're doing a reduction in parking, so parking lot landscaping probably wouldn't be triggered. I'm not sure too much is going to be triggered one way or the other, but at the end of the day, it depends on what the intent is. If it's a 25, 50, or 75% increase in space, that'll change what's applicable as far as what needs to be added to this. So I can't really speak to, I don't know 100% of the plans.
Yeah, thank you.
Any further discussion? All right, seeing none, we'll open the public hearing. Anybody in attendance who wishes to speak on behalf of this agenda item? Anybody in attendance wish to speak in opposition to this agenda item? Anybody who wish to speak for or against? Okay, seeing none, I'll close the public hearing and turn it over to the commissioners.
I'll move to approve based on staff recommendations and finding of fact.
Motion to approve by Commissioner Baumann,
I'll second.
second by Commissioner Kibler. Any discussion? Commissioner Baumann.
Again, this seems like the most appropriate time, but I actually just want to publicly thank staff. This project and project number 6 are great examples of redevelopment and infill within our community. We're not expanding our infrastructure base, and we are expanding our tax base for both of these properties. So kudos to you. I know that there's a lot of behind-the-scenes work to bring these things forward to us, but I think you're doing a good job with it, and these last 2 projects really show. So nice work. Thanks for doing that.
Any further discussion? Okay, seeing none, call the roll.
Baumann?
Yes.
Domes?
Yes.
Bacon?
Yes.
Gates?
Yes.
Hochhalter?
Yes.
Iverson?
Yes.
Kibler?
Yes.
Longton?
Yes.
Minnem?
Yes.
Nesdall?
Yes.
Offerdahl?
Yes,
Pontanilla?
Yes.
Motion carries.
motion carries. Okay, moving on to agenda item number 8. Text amended fencing, public hearing request by the City of Minot for a zoning text amendment to accommodate changes to the land development ordinance of the City of Minot. The affected sections are as follows: Section 3.1-9 and 11, related to fence regulations and visibility triangles respectively. That, we'll turn it over to the staff for their report.
Thank you, Chairman Offerdahl, members of the commission. Let's see. This will be relatively quick. So as a summary of changes. So fences in residential districts would be limited to 8 foot in height or else need to be conditionally permitted. It should be noted that fences 8.5 feet or higher require engineering and a building permit per the state and local building code requirements already. At this time, we don't have a limit on the height of residential fencing or fencing in that matter, for any fencing for that matter. There used to be a 6-foot height limitation on fencing. However, due to topography, if you're on a slope in your rear yard, say your neighbor in the rear was elevated much higher, you might want to have a higher fence. But to have this ensures that we're not establishing what's considered to be a spite fence, building a fence so high that it is obnoxious to your neighboring property owner, which, yes, does happen in some communities, and thankfully, at least at this time, we don't have that. At the end of the day, most people do not build higher fences than 8 feet because they cut the boards at 6 foot and 8 foot, and it is just outrageously expensive to get engineering and the building permits and the lumber and or other materials required to construct these much taller fences. So should not be impactful to residents in Minot whatsoever, but at least allows a path forward through that conditional use permit process if needed. Also added fence height calculations, so how we determine what fence height is. So it's just measured from the ground. This way we're not, at the end of the day, you sometimes have to define things that might be disputable, and that's what we've done. Another change would be black powder coated chain link. It would now be permitted in commercial districts, and traditional chain link would be permitted in limited circumstances. So think your ballparks, schools, anywhere else in a public district property that you've seen a chain link fence. Well, technically and historically, they've required to follow C2 design requirements, which presently prohibit chain link at all. Well, the city doesn't actually issue fencing permits, and so a lot of times fences are constructed without approval from the city, and it may not be compliant with the requirements of the public zoning district or commercial zoning district. Nonetheless, this would effectively acknowledge some of the existing development and then also provide a path forward for black powder coated chain link. And that's just determined to be a more aesthetically pleasing chain link option for commercial development. Finally, the Minot Code of Ordinances section on visibility triangles was updated to a new location. So really, that new section is updated within this amendment as well. So it's not wild amendments coming before you, but one last minute change. So what's highlighted is a last minute change. This is with regard to barbed wire and concertina wire and electrified fencing component. So in the Minot Code of Ordinances, we do have limitations on electrified fencing. And so what I've done is just refer to subject to limitations for barbed wire electric fences within the city limits. So, and barbed wire has to be at least 6 feet off the ground. You can't have barbed wire below that level. This is just a health and safety. And then electric fences are just prohibited within city limits. So wanted to make sure the two codes, the municipal code and then the land development ordinance, jive. So staff's recommending the Planning Commission adopt staff findings of fact. The amendment is provided in Exhibit 1, and then with the change presented in staff's verbal report. So I'll stand for questions.
Any questions for the city staff?
Mr. Chairman, I don't know what bearing these rules would have for the extraterritorial district, but certainly there's a lot of barbed wire and electrified fencing that's lower than 6 feet. So I just wonder if it applies to the ET zone, and if so, any kind of amendments or qualifications or variances for all those who have, got electric fencing and barbed wire lower than 6 feet?
Yeah, so let's see. So if we read the code, we'll just go back to the barbed wire section. So this, and I should have specifically noted this. This would fall within the commercial industrial districts only, so it wouldn't apply to ag and rural residential. So for any commercial and/or industrial pieces of property within the ETJ, this would still apply, but I can't think of an instance where it would be needed.
Just as a follow-on, does anyone have barbed wire inside the city? I mean, have you been out there looking and finding barbed wire fencing?
Chairman Offerdahl, Commissioner Kibler, the code is working well, I guess. I don't know. Honestly, I don't. I'm not sure if they do or not. At the end of the day, if it becomes a problem, this gives us the ability to enforce it. So.
Any other questions for city staff? Questions? All right, seeing none, I'll open the public hearing. Anybody wish to speak on behalf of this agenda item? Anybody wish to speak in opposition of this agenda item? Anybody wish to speak for or against this agenda item? Seeing none, close the public hearing, and I'll turn it over to the commissioners for a motion.
I would move to approve based on staff finding of fact. However wary I am of any kind of a position like an 8-foot fence on private property owners. But move to approve.
Motion to approve by Commissioner Kibler,
I will second that.
second by Commissioner Iverson. Any further discussion? Any further discussion? All right, we'll call the roll.
Bauman?
Yes.
Domes? Bacon?
Yes.
Gates?
Yes.
Burkhalter?
Yes.
Iverson?
Yes.
Kibler?
Yes.
Longton?
Yes.
Minnem?
Yes.
Nesdal?
Yes.
Offerdahl?
Yes.
Pontanilla?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, motion carries. We'll move on to agenda item number 9, other business. Do we have
Yes.
do we have some other business today?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, just want to give a quick update on our comprehensive plan project. That's coming along very well. It's coming along within schedule. Our consultant has completed the first draft of the comprehensive plan. John and I have spent the last couple of weeks going through it, making some adjustments. There will be our final public workshop sometime in the middle of February. We're finalizing the plans for that workshop. If you're a follower of the city's social media or you follow the local news, press releases will be sent out to all the local media outlets, and our city PIO will be sending out notices through all of our social media platforms, giving the date, time, and location of that workshop. And then after the workshop, we'll put the final touches on the plan, and then we'll go send it through the public hearing process. I expect that it will go before this commission in the month of May, at your May meeting, for a public hearing and recommendation to city council. And then it will go to city council for final approval after that.
Thank you. Any comments?
Just a thanks to staff serving on the steering committee for the comprehensive plan update. Mr. Van Dyke and Mr. Billingsley and all of our staff really have done a good job of moving what is kind of a giant task forward for the community. It's been a fun process to be a part of and to see from start to finish. So kudos to the planning division. And I would encourage my peers and colleagues to at least take a second to review, and if nothing else, offer a comment or two. It's an exciting vision for our community, and I think one that, while no one gets everything that they want, I think there's a lot of really great things where we all get to meet in the middle and some really, really cool things. So, yeah, it's worthwhile.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Bauman. Chairman, members of the commission, as a reminder, especially for the new members, we do have a project website. It is 2040plan.com. Is it Minot 2040? Minot2040.com? Yeah, www.minot2040.com is the website. We will post the final draft of the plan when it's ready on the website for you and for the general public to review.
Thank you. Any other business items? All right, seeing none, have adjournment.